Evidence secured at marker 4. Advise command we are holding the scene.
Copy that. It's getting heavier out here.
Someone looking for their grandmother just doomed a kidnapper. The FBI now wields a weapon, rendering clean crime scenes obsolete. Detectives need no fingerprints, demand no confessions, and require zero criminal history from targets. In Pima County, Arizona, agents investigate the vanishing of Nancy Guthrie. The Bureau utilizes a forensic tactic, hunting targets through the DNA of innocent relatives. Somewhere in America, a distant relative uploaded their genetic profile to a genealogy platform to pinpoint their grandmother's birthplace. That relative possesses no clue what they just triggered. They remain unaware that tracing their heritage likely handed detectives the master key to crack this kidnapping. That key involves C.C. Moore, the chief genetic genealogist at Parabon NanoLabs in Virginia. She stared into a camera recently, delivering a warning to the masked individual who abducted 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie from her Tucson home in the Catalina Foothills. Moore chose her vocabulary with absolute precision, stating, "If I was the kidnapper, I would be extremely concerned right now because using investigative genetic genealogy, he will be identified. Not might be identified. Will be identified. This is the investigation room. Let's follow the science. Inside this room, we track hard evidence, ignoring the headlines, ignoring the speculation, and studying the actual forensic record, delivering new in-depth documentaries weekly. Tens of thousands of you track this case closely based on the response to our previous coverage, so hit that like button right now. Pressing that button pushes this investigation outward. Consider this unsettling question while we proceed. Anyone who ever mailed a saliva sample to a commercial ancestry company operates as, willingly or otherwise, an active participant in unmasking this target. That includes you. How does that truth hit you? We plan to weigh that question medically and ethically alongside physical evidence. First, let us rewind the timeline to zero. Nancy resides in the Catalina Foothills of Tucson, Arizona, a quiet residential grid against the Santa Catalina Mountains north of the city. She raised Savannah Guthrie, who anchors NBC News and co-hosts the Today Show, meeting every definition of a vulnerable adult. She swallows medication daily. A severe cardiac condition dictates that a pacemaker regulate her heartbeat. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos spoke at his February 3rd press conference, stating plainly, "Nancy could not walk 50 yards by herself. Women unable to walk 50 yards never stroll into the night alone." On January 31st, 2026, Nancy ate dinner with family. Later that night, at roughly 9:50 p.m. Mountain Time, her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, drove her home. Nobody publicly identified ever confirmed seeing Nancy Guthrie alive after that exact moment. A rigid digital timeline took over next, with automated devices around her property recording subsequent events without emotion. At 1:47 a.m. on February 1st, someone severed her Nest doorbell camera. At 2:12 a.m., a secondary home camera logged motion without available footage. At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker application disconnected from her Apple devices. At 2:36 a.m., a Ring camera mounted on a neighbor's house roughly 2.5 miles away recorded a vehicle blasting past. Around 12 noon, when Nancy missed her scheduled online church service, relatives reported her missing. Investigators confirmed Nancy's blood stained the front porch. The FBI published surveillance video documenting a masked figure carrying a backpack, wearing a holstered firearm, and sporting gloves, physically disabling the doorbell camera during those early morning hours of February 1st. Authorities have not named that figure publicly. Not yet. We know who it is not. Sheriff Nanos formally cleared the family as suspects, following exhaustive interviews and comprehensive vetting. Detectives pivoted their entire focus directly toward the biological footprint abandoned at the crime scene. That biological trace holds the absolute core of this manhunt right now. The intruder assumed the mask, heavy gloves, and cover of darkness guaranteed total forensic invisibility. They calculated wrong. People shed biology everywhere they step. They leave skin cells rubbed against a doorframe, trace DNA on surfaces, microscopic respiratory droplets, or single strands of hair. This target stood on that exact property before. The FBI confirmed video evidence places the masked figure at the Guthrie residence on a prior date, moving without the backpack and lacking the holster. Multiple trips generate multiple deposits, leaving more DNA. We know the evidence exists. The true puzzle involves calculating what it takes to convert that evidence into a name. Resolving that puzzle represents the most monumental forensic leap in the entire history of this case. Let us map out this precise sequence. A microscopic mistake should have exposed the intruder instantly. Detectives always feed crime scene DNA into CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. This operates as the FBI's central genetic database, representing the most formidable law enforcement weapon ever built. It holds nearly 27 million DNA files, factoring in over 19 million records from convicted criminals. The entire machine runs incredibly fast. Submit a prepared swab, and definitive hits can bounce back in exactly 24 hours. Yet this massive system hides one extremely critical blind spot. It operates entirely closed. It only tags ghosts who previously passed through the criminal justice machine. If the prime suspect in the Guthrie kidnapping spent their entire life successfully dodging handcuffs, if a judge never convicted them of a qualifying felony and never demanded a court-ordered biological swab, their profile simply ghosts the network. Detectives processed 2 Guthrie samples here. They initiated 2 independent database searches, 2 completely blank screens. Authorities tested the glove dumped roughly 2 miles from Nancy's house, which federal agents confirmed visually matched the suspect's handwear in that chilling doorbell video. The query returned absolutely nothing. Forensics ultimately linked that specific material to an unconnected local restaurant worker. They analyzed the DNA recovered inside Nancy's home. That trace belonged neither to her nor to anyone holding authorized access. The system again hit nothing. When the National Registry hit a dead end, detectives shifted tactics away from standard forensics toward investigative genetic genealogy, or IGG. The sole focus became the assailant's hidden family tree. Standard biological analysis, exactly like the method running CODIS, scrutinizes roughly 20 specific genetic markers. Those data points perfectly verify whether a crime scene swab originated from one specific, previously identified suspect. But they completely fail to yield enough data to build an unknown profile from scratch. IGG operates on a totally different battlefield. By evaluating over 500,000 markers across the complete human genome, it constructs a complex forensic DNA profile. This specific rendering does not immediately identify one isolated suspect. It does something subtler and infinitely more powerful. It maps a biological fingerprint, exposing deep family branches. It connects 3rd, 4th, and 5th cousins individuals, sharing merely 1% of the perpetrator's biology. Think deeply about that reality. You share genetic code with total strangers, distant relatives residing in states you have never visited, people who bought a DNA kit 3 years ago just to trace their own ancestral roots. Every single one currently acts as a data point, hunting Nancy Guthrie's kidnapper today. The suspect felt completely invisible. They forgot the cousin who mailed a saliva sample to an ancestry company for the holidays. Now detectives hunt them through the biological history of millions who made that casual choice, without realizing their data might trap a masked phantom standing on an 84-year-old woman's porch at 1:47 in the morning. C.C. Moore, the lead genetic genealogist at Parabon NanoLabs, stated it bluntly during an NBC News interview. She warned, "If I was the kidnapper, I would be extremely concerned right now." She added that with investigative genetic genealogy, identification is just a matter of time. Not a possibility, not a probability. A matter of time. The historical precedents backing this technology remain bulletproof, and studying them reveals exactly the nightmare scenario this Guthrie suspect faces today. The investigation that permanently cemented genetic genealogy as a devastating forensic weapon? The Golden State Killer. Joseph James DeAngelo executed 13 homicides and committed over 50 sexual assaults throughout California, between 1974 and 1986. For over 3 brutal decades, he operated as an utter phantom, dodging every single police database. 0 viable leads. He completely defeated every single conventional investigative tool available. Then, in 2018, agents uploaded his biological profile straight into GEDmatch, an open-source ancestry network granting police access. That specific genetic sequence flagged a distant relative. Genealogists painstakingly constructed a family tree around that single hit. The branches narrowed. The dragnet cornered one individual. Joseph James DeAngelo spent decades hiding in broad daylight. He previously carried a badge as a cop. He retired peacefully to Citrus Heights, California. Detectives eventually snagged a discarded piece of trash straight from his curb of tissue. They confirmed the genetic match. Authorities arrested Joseph James DeAngelo in April 2018. He eventually pled guilty to multiple homicide charges, immediately catching a strict life sentence behind bars without parole. That exact same cutting-edge science that dragged him into the light now targets the biological trace inside Nancy Guthrie's home. A microscopic piece of garbage ultimately captured a mass murderer. The blueprint for this modern manhunt traces back to November 13, 2022. We are talking about Bryan Kohberger and the University of Idaho homicides. Assailants targeted 4 undergraduates: Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Sanna Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, brutally stabbing them inside their off-campus residence in Moscow, Idaho. Detectives secured a discarded knife sheath left behind at the crime scene, containing a vital genetic trace. Authorities entered that biological material directly into the CODIS database. They hit a dead end. So, detectives pivoted immediately toward genetic genealogy. Specialists engineered a complex family tree using the forensic profile pulled straight from that leather sheath. The genetic branches led straight toward a specific family living in Pennsylvania. What happened next? Law enforcement executed covert surveillance on the Kohberger property before moving in to make any arrests. Agents seized garbage from outside the residence, executing standard protocol for genetic genealogy operations. A recovered cotton swab from that refuse definitively confirmed the familial connection. Police placed Bryan Kohberger in handcuffs on December 30, 2022. By July 2, 2025, he entered a guilty plea covering all 4 counts of first-degree murder. The judge handed down his sentence on July 23, 2025. 4 consecutive life terms eliminating any parole possibility, plus an extra 10 years for burglary. A leather sheath built the map, while standard driveway garbage from Pennsylvania locked the trap. This defines genetic genealogy in active practice. Now, the prime suspect in the Guthrie case faces that exact same relentless technology. The masked intruder thought gloves and facial coverings provided enough protection. They completely ignored the biological traces left behind at a property they visited on multiple occasions. They carried their own conviction inside every single cellular structure of their body. Right now, the laboratory continues building that map. However, moving from a raw biological sample to a confirmed identity presents massive hurdles. This community needs to understand those exact obstacles immediately. They explain the current state of the active investigation and decode the specific decisions regarding evidence handling. What is the primary roadblock? The actual nature of the recovered DNA sample itself. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos issued a public confirmation regarding the evidence recovered from NY's property. It contains a mixed profile. A mixed sample inherently holds genetic material originating from multiple distinct individuals. The victim's sequence exists there. The suspect's sequence potentially exists there too. Traces from people maintaining lawful property access, relatives, service professionals, casual visitors also factor into this. When examining a blended sample, extracting a strictly usable forensic profile relies entirely on one critical variable: the isolated proportion of the suspect's biology compared against the overall mixture. Colleen Fitzpatrick, a veteran American genetic genealogist bringing decades of field experience, addressed this dynamic. If the blend reveals 90% victim biology alongside 10% suspect material, the collection might lack sufficient suspect material to actually build a functional profile for active database searching. Understand this clearly. This represents a physical reality of crime scene biology, not a technological defect. Barbara Ray Venter, the pioneering genetic genealogist who anchored the Golden State Killer identification, analyzed the sheriff's public statements regarding these evidentiary challenges. She noted the ratio likely contains too much victim biology, overpowering the suspect's specific contribution. Will this roadblock break the case? Expert consensus shifts toward intense optimism here. C.C. Moore from Parabon NanoLabs, the premier practitioner operating in this discipline, spoke explicitly to NBC News regarding the Guthrie case mixture. She stated, "We have had success with a lot of cases with mixtures." She did acknowledge that blended samples demand rigorous additional analytical processing steps. Once technicians generate that initial baseline sequence, bioinformatics scientists must dissect the file, forcefully extracting the suspect's specific genetic contribution out from the blend. Then she added a critical detail. She stated that discovering mixed biology generates intense hope because finding any non-victim material remains entirely consistent with the reality that the suspect dropped traceable physical evidence at the location. Moore delivered an unambiguous public conclusion. If the suspect acts as the primary contributor within the mixture, and their material dominates the sample, scientists can deconstruct the profile. Law enforcement can identify the suspect. David Middleman, a forensic genealogist and CEO of Othram, the Texas-based forensic facility instrumental in the Kohberger investigation, highlighted that the technology active in 2026 heavily outpaces standard procedural hurdles. Detectives currently manipulate DNA quantities universally dismissed as completely unusable just 5 years ago. The foundational science no longer acts as the limiting factor. What actually terrifies the forensic community involves something else entirely. A detail completely disconnected from the biological evidence itself, yet totally dependent on its physical destination. When the CODIS database searches yielded 0 results, the subsequent protocol seemed obvious. Submit those biological sequences to the most sophisticated forensic genealogy resources available inside the country. The process meant to catch the killer might have already erased the answer. Investigators must prepare investigative genetic genealogy profiles, upload them to accessible databases, and build the tree. Operating from Quantico, Virginia, the FBI's National Crime Laboratory reigns as America's most advanced forensic analysis facility. Forensic experts confirm this facility utilizes a direct pipeline, a proven workflow, converting forensic DNA profiles into actionable genealogical searches. They have successfully processed cases utilizing this exact technology. Their internal protocols targeting mixed sample analysis, securing the chain of custody, and dictating court admissibility stand rigorously tested. The FBI requested that all physical evidence from Nancy Guthrie's home, including a glove and raw DNA, head to Quantico, but someone intervened. Puma County Sheriff Chris Nanos rejected the request, shipping the samples to DNA Labs International in Florida. This private laboratory holds an existing contract with the Sheriff's Department. That specific decision cost the county $200,000. Senior figures within the forensic community reacted with what one expert speaking to reporters described as uncharacteristically blunt criticism. Experts do not question the Florida laboratory's basic scientific competence. They question whether its protocols handling mixed DNA and its pipeline connecting forensic profiling to investigative genetic genealogy databases match what Quantico provides. We are facing an irreversible scientific reality. Why? Traditional forensic analysis utilizes short tandem repeat processing STR analysis, a procedure that physically consumes the DNA. This rigorous process extracts genetic information straight from the biological material, inherently destroying the sample completely. Once consumed, nobody can recover it. The evidence vanishes. If STR analysis consumed the sample before leadership pursued investigative genetic genealogy, and if it vanished before technicians preserved enough material for genealogical work, Investigators may have compromised the evidence before applying the most powerful investigative tool available today. This is the central concern, not misconduct, and certainly not corruption. It is a procedural decision that leading forensic scientists argue narrowed the window for identifying the suspect. How did Nanos respond? Nanos publicly defended his decision, explaining the Florida lab already held all comparative DNA markers, including elimination profiles for known contacts. He insisted that splitting evidence between two labs creates inconsistency. While this represents a legitimate operational argument, multiple former senior FBI officials disagree. Speaking publicly, they characterized this as the wrong call for an active case where time and forensic resources remain critical. What matters right now is not the procedural decision itself. What matters is what happens next. It involves sprawling databases, complex decision trees, and a moving system. Step 1 requires generating a forensic DNA profile from the scene. This isn't a 20-marker CODIS profile. This requires a comprehensive genomic profile, analyzing hundreds of thousands of genetic markers. Producing this data demands highly specialized equipment and unique expertise. Virginia's Parabon NanoLabs leads the nation here. Step 2 uploads that profile to law enforcement accessible genealogy databases. The critical detail rests on strict limitations regarding which databases investigators use. Law enforcement currently accesses only 3 databases for investigative genetic genealogy: GE Deadmatch, Family Tree DNA, and DNA Justice. Combined, they hold under 2 million user profiles. Commercial giants like Ancestry DNA, boasting well over 25 million profiles, and 23andMe, with roughly 12 million, completely block law enforcement database access. They cite user privacy. Parabon NanoLabs' CC Moore addressed this directly. She told Newsweek, "If they were able to get the DNA in those large databases with 25 million people, 12 million people and so on, then it could be a very, very quick identification. It isn't a technology failure. It is a policy failure demanding action." This explains exactly why the FBI just issued an urgent, direct appeal to the American public. If you took a commercial DNA test through Ancestry DNA, 23andMe, or MyHeritage, you can download your raw genetic data and voluntarily upload it to GE Deadmatch or Family Tree DNA today. Both platforms utilize opt-in mechanisms, making your personal data immediately available for law enforcement genealogy searches. Your data could connect the suspect's family tree. This remains an active case. If you ever took a DNA test and want to do something concrete to locate Nancy Guthrie, this is how you act. A secret pre-abduction photo proves this stalker walked the grounds beforehand. What they left behind changes everything. First, understand Step 3, genealogical research following a match. Human experts take control here. Elite genealogists construct a family tree around that single matching profile. They hunt forward and backward across generations, using public filings, census statistics, obituaries, birth certificates, death records, social media, and historical archives to identify anyone capable of producing that exact forensic DNA. This is not instantaneous. It demands true expertise. It requires extreme patience. It demands accessing historical records that frequently sit incomplete. CC Moore identified a massive variable here, dictating the entire timeline. Who is the ghost? The speed of genetic identification hinges entirely on one variable: the suspect's specific ancestry. Moore explained this dynamic repeatedly. If the hunted suspect claims deep United States roots and possesses Northwest European heritage, accessible commercial databases heavily represent their genetic family members. Cousins already populate those systems. Investigators forge connections rapidly. Moore stated that if the suspect holds deep American roots and is Caucasian, investigators could expose their identity in minutes or hours. But if they possess recent immigrant heritage or anchor their family tree outside the United States, database representation suddenly plummets. Locking down that critical genealogical link becomes agonizingly slow. Barbara Ray Venter, The investigator who famously unmasked the Golden State Killer highlighted a devastating dimension of this limitation regarding African American family lineages. She noted that genealogical digging for Black families repeatedly slams into what she terms a brick wall at emancipation, the historical cutoff around 1863, where detailed documentation of individual families essentially vanishes. DNA technology does not cause this systemic failure. Historical injustice caused it. We are watching the intentional destruction of family records during slavery bleed directly into modern forensic science. The speed and absolute success of genetic investigations are never racially neutral. They mirror the severe inequities of historical record-keeping. Detectives understand this. They adjust for it, yet it remains a massive variable dictating the timeline. How does this end? Step 4 delivers the confirmation. Once genealogists narrow that sprawling tree down to one candidate or a tight suspect pool, agents execute covert DNA collection. They grab a discarded item from the suspect's daily environment, a coffee cup, a cigarette, a tissue, public trash receptacle items. Lab techs test this sample to verify an exact match against the crime scene profile. This exact protocol doomed Joseph James DeAngelo as the Golden State Killer. This same strategy cornered Bryan Kohberger using his father's discarded Q-tip from a Pennsylvania trash can. Once the lab confirms that match, the tactical arrest follows. This is the process. It is happening. It remains in motion right now. We know the science works. The real question is whether the physical evidence holds enough integrity to cross the finish line. Do they actually have what they need? They absolutely do. CNN recently reported a massive investigative development demanding our intense scrutiny, citing embedded sources highly familiar with the probe. The FBI holds a photograph capturing the suspect on the Guthrie property preceding the abduction night. Look closely. The individual lacks the dark backpack. They are completely missing the gun holster caught on doorbell camera footage the exact night Nancy vanished. This explosive revelation carries forensic weight in two distinct ways. First, it proves what behavioral analysts previously theorized. The perpetrator executed physical reconnaissance on that property long before launching the actual abduction. This was a deliberate, pre-planned operation. The suspect studied the target. They memorized the layout. They stood on that ground beforehand. Second, and this holds the ultimate key for the genetic genealogy endgame, every single visit to a target location generates a fresh opportunity to transfer biological material. Dead skin cells shed onto contact surfaces. Invisible respiratory droplets settle. A hand gripping a gate. A body near a window. Just one moment of physical proximity to any hard surface leaves microscopic genetic trace behind. The more times this predator stalked the Guthrie property, the more biological deposits they unknowingly scattered. This fundamentally flips the script. The mixed DNA recovered from that scene isn't merely a challenge, it is an opportunity. That sample might contain the suspect's definitive genetic signature from multiple independent deposits across multiple occasions. Elite forensic bioinformaticians processing mixed sample cases verify a critical fact. Each additional deposit mathematically strengthens the suspect's biological signal within that complex mixture. A microscopic trace of DNA holds the exact identity of a ghost. The laboratory is working with what it has, and it may be more than initially appeared. What does it mean to live in a modern era where your personal genetic data is a forensic asset? Every person who has ever taken a commercial DNA test made a specific choice. They chose to submit their genetic information, their most personal biological data, to a private company for analysis. They received ancestry reports. They found cousins. They discovered unexpected heritage. Most did not think about law enforcement. Most did not think about the distinct possibility that a distant relative, someone they never met, might one day commit a serious crime. But this reality exists whether we think about it or not. Does the suspect know we are already inside their family tree? The GE Dead Match database, a primary platform law enforcement accesses, has sat at the center of this legal debate for years. Back in 2018, When investigators utilized GDmatch to identify the Golden State Killer, the platform had not formally opted into law enforcement use. The FBI acknowledged this directly in court documents related to the Bryan Kohberger case, noting that investigators accessed profiles from people who had not explicitly consented to law enforcement searches. The platform subsequently changed its policy, shifting to an opt-in model for law enforcement access. Who owns your DNA once it leaves your body? The tension at the center of this ethical debate is real, and it resolves for no one easily. On one side, the genetic privacy of millions of people making personal decisions about biological data without anticipating investigators using it as a forensic tool. On the opposite side, an 84-year-old woman taken from her home in the middle of the night, who has been missing for more than 40 days, whose family waits every day for answers. Both sides of that tension deserve serious attention. CeCe Moore, who spends her career navigating exactly this tension, frames it this way. The technology gives investigators a name. What investigators do with that name still requires all traditional investigative processes. Court orders, physical surveillance, confirmed physical evidence, and prosecutorial review must happen before any arrest occurs. The genealogical search is a lead generator. It is never a verdict. Every suspect identified through investigative genetic genealogy still receives full due process protection. That distinction matters. It contextualizes the forensic process within an established legal framework without dissolving privacy concerns. Is the crime scene DNA enough to build that framework? As of the day of this investigation, here is what the forensic record shows. The DNA recovered from Nancy Guthrie's home does not match anyone in CODIS. The DNA is a complex mixture. Scientists must carefully separate the suspect's contribution from the victim's before an investigative genetic genealogy search proceeds effectively. Investigators traced a glove recovered 2 meters from the home to a restaurant worker with zero connection to the investigation. Search teams left most of the 16 pairs of gloves recovered in the immediate area. The private laboratory in Florida is currently processing the biological evidence. The FBI confirmed they are pursuing investigative genetic genealogy options. Pima County Sheriff Nanos told NBC News, investigators are definitely closer to identifying a suspect. A 5-person dedicated task force currently operates. The department moved 4 detectives and 1 sergeant from the Pima County Sheriff's Department to the FBI's Tucson office. The investigation is absolutely not cold. It represents the state's most active forensic site. The $1.2 million combined reward remains entirely active, but the truly powerful pressure on the suspect is not coming from the reward money. It stems from the 500,000 genetic markers mapping across a family tree that slowly, inevitably narrows. The next critical milestone in this case will not be a press conference. It will be a quiet, private confirmation inside a laboratory, probably late at night, when a match returns from the database and a name appears on a screen for the first time. That moment initiates a strict surveillance protocol. Investigators will identify the candidate, observe them, wait for a discarded biological item, and meticulously collect the confirmation sample. A cup, a cigarette, a discarded tissue. The exact protocol that caught Joseph James DeAngelo. The protocol that caught Bryan Kohberger. The protocol investigators are preparing for the person who stood at Nancy Guthrie's front door at 1:47 in the morning. They planned for everything, but failed to account for their own bloodline. Because the analytical work this community accomplishes on this case, in the comments, in the forums, and in the direct messages this channel receives, represents collective forensic engagement, holding real, actionable value. Here are the critical open questions remaining unresolved as of this investigation. Take them to the comments. Bring your analysis. Open question 1 involves the mixed DNA ratio. The suspect must be the primary contributor in the mixture for investigative genetic genealogy to proceed effectively. The suspect did not just strike once. They walked onto the property multiple times. Experts note this repeated exposure might offset the unfavorable forensic ratio. Does this multiple exposure guarantee a higher total deposit of the suspect's DNA compared to a single visit? Do forensic experts watching believe we have a viable profile? And who handles it? The answer lies in Florida. Sheriff Nanos defended bypassing Quantico to use DNA Labs International. He cited consistent evidence handling and the established comparison database to justify the move. Former FBI officials called this decision highly problematic. Has any independent analysis compared the Florida facility's genetic genealogy capabilities against Quantico? What does your research reveal? The next question looms. We must examine the prior visit. The FBI holds an image showing the suspect on the property before abduction night, lacking a backpack and holster. This indicates reconnaissance, but also signals potential biological deposits. Did investigators confirm if collected forensic evidence covers both the abduction night and previous visits? That detail dictates the DNA analysis. Where do we search? We search the accessible databases. Law enforcement currently accesses under 2 million profiles across GED Match, Family Tree DNA, and DNA Justice. The commercial giants lock down nearly 40 million combined profiles. The FBI issued a public appeal for voluntary uploads. How many of you uploaded raw genetic data to those databases since Nancy vanished? If you act, the statistical probability of a match skyrockets. But what profile do we need? We need the ancestral factor. C.C. Moore's stated identification speed relies heavily on whether the suspect possesses deep American roots and Northwest European ancestry, based on your visual analysis of doorbell footage. Look at the build, gait, and physical details. What ancestry do you spot? We are not speculating. We are analyzing the forensic variable dictating the genetic genealogy timeline. Take these thoughts below. You already contribute vital analytical work to public understanding of this case, and that effort continues. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. An intruder took her from her home during the early hours of February 1, 2026. Investigators discovered her blood on the front porch. Savannah Guthrie told her Today Show colleagues on March 5th, "I am still standing, and I still have hope, and I am still me." That statement must frame every single second of this investigation. Someone knows the identity of that masked figure. Someone who never considered themselves part of a true crime story, went home 3 Christmases ago and swabbed their cheek. They sealed the sample. They mailed it out. They waited for an ancestry report. They never knew they built a forensic trail. They never realized that genetic branch would lead here. The lab works. The family tree takes shape. The individual who took Nancy Guthrie assumed the darkness, mask, and gloves, offered complete protection. They carry their own conviction locked inside every cell of their body. The science is coming. The pacemaker still transmits. The laboratory still tests. The family tree still expands. Nancy Guthrie deserves to return home. Her family deserves answers, and investigators will uncover the truth, branch by branch, marker by marker, one genetic match at a time. Did this investigation stick with you? If the forensic science we broke down today provided a clearer picture of where this case heads and how close resolution remains, subscribe to the Investigation Room. Hit that notification bell. We dissect cases like this every week. We follow the verified evidence. We respect the victims involved, and we refuse to stop until we present the full picture. Smash the like button and tell me in the comments, did you upload your raw DNA data to GED Match or Family Tree DNA? If not, do it now. The FBI asks, the family pleads, the technology waits. Your data might just be the branch that closes this case. Tell me in the comments which exact piece of forensic evidence from today's deep dive you find most compelling. Does the mixed DNA challenge hook you, or the database access gap? What about the prior visit and its implications for additional biological deposits? Your independent analytical work matters. It always has. If you hold any crucial information regarding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, dial the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI. Submit online tips at tips.fbi.gov. Contact the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. You can submit every tip anonymously. The Guthrie family currently offers $1 million for information leading directly to Nancy's safe recovery. Additional reward money from the FBI and Crime Stoppers pushes the total available funds to over $1.2 million. We presented this active investigation with utmost respect for Nancy Guthrie and her loved ones. A sudden tragedy demands truth. We examine hard evidence to uncover it, refusing to sensationalize this active crisis. Nancy requires every analytical resource, every public conversation, and every single pair of eyes focused directly on her open case today. Thank you for treating this investigation with absolute seriousness. Who is she? Nancy Guthrie, 84, Catalina Foothills, Tucson, Arizona. She remains completely missing. Active searches continue. Bring her home.